My name is Robert Miller, but most folks just call me Bob. I'm 76 years old, born and raised right here in Nashville, and I've lived here my whole life. That afternoon, I was sitting at my usual spot, the corner perk, right on Maple and 3rd. It's the same place I sit every morning, watching people hurry to work, listening to the church bells, and sipping a piping hot black coffee, nice and slow. On the table next to my steaming mug was a bank transfer slip. I'd already filled out the recipient's name, Alex Miller, my only son. Amount, $40,000. Note, wedding gift. Love, Dad. I'd saved that money for 2 years, did odd electrical jobs for the neighbors, changed light fixtures at the corner store, even skipped buying my arthritis medicine some months just to put a few extra bucks away. I remember the thrill I felt when I heard Alex was getting married. It made my old heart feel young again. I wanted to give him something truly significant. Something that, when he looked back, would make him think, my dad was there for me. I pulled out my phone, intending to text him. Son, I just transferred the money. Wishing you all the happiness in the world. But before I could hit send, the screen lit up. A new message. Just a few lines. Dad, don't even bother coming to the wedding. Jessica doesn't want you there. She says you'll ruin everything. I read it once, then again, and a third time. Each word was a physical blow to my chest. Ruin everything. Ruin it all. So, on my son's happiest day, I was the thing that would ruin it all. I just sat there, frozen. The steam from my coffee blurred my vision. The noise from the street faded away. All that was left was the pounding in my chest and my own ragged breath. I remembered all the years gone by, climbing utility poles under that scorching sun, my bare hands working on live wires, and still smiling, thinking about the dinner I'd share with my wife and my boy. Carol, my wife, passed away 15 years ago. She always used to say, Bob, love teaches you, but sometimes it also blinds you. I looked at the transfer slip, at my shaky, clumsy handwriting. I felt like I was looking at my own old age, frail, unnecessary, out of place. I smiled, but it was a dry, humorless smile. The phone was still lit up next to my cup. That message burned into my mind. I opened the banking app. My finger hovered over the confirm button, but it stopped. I switched screens and pressed cancel transaction. I deleted the text thread and blocked the number. Nobody in the coffee shop noticed that an old man had just lost his reason for living. I stood up. I left the cash for the coffee on the table. As I walked out, the afternoon sun hit my shoulders, stretching my shadow long across the sidewalk. I walked slowly, watching the fathers and sons laughing on the street. One little boy was holding his dad's hand, showing him a donut he'd just gotten, laughing that innocent laugh. I lowered my head. I crumpled the unsent transfer slip in my fingers and mumbled, so low only I could hear it. I just wanted to be there, even if I had to sit in the back row. I stuffed the paper in my pocket and kept walking home. The afternoon in Nashville was still warm, but inside me, winter had just begun. Before we continue, make sure to subscribe to the channel and let us know where you're listening from in the comments below. I was born in a little, clapboard house on the noisiest street in Nashville. My father was a construction worker. My mother sold bread at the farmer's market. From the time I was a kid, I got used to the sound of hammers, the smell of sweat, and the sight of calloused hands. When I was young, I chose to be an electrician. Everyone said it was dangerous. Few men last long in that line of work, they'd say. But I like the light. I like the feeling, after fixing a circuit, of seeing a dark house suddenly blaze with light and hearing the kids yell, "Mom, the lights are on. They're on." Maybe that's why I spent my life climbing poles, hauling cable, putting up with sun and rain. I got zapped twice. Badly. Burned the skin right off my wrists. But the next day, I was back at it. It was a poor man's job, sure, but it gave me a simple pride. I bring light to other people's homes. I met Carol when we were young. She was the seamstress on the corner, always smiling even when the needle pricked her fingers. Every afternoon, when I walked past her shop, she'd look up and joke, "Mr. Electrician, don't you go starting a fire in my shop with all those sparks." Our love grew from those simple, warm, unadorned sentences, but it was as strong as the beams of a house. When we got married, we had nothing, just an old bed and a curtain she'd sewn from fabric scraps. And still, I felt complete. We had toast for breakfast and laughter for dinner. Then Alex was born. I'd never been so happy. The first time I held him, my hands were shaking like I'd grabbed a live wire. But this was a gentle current, the kind that warms your heart instead of burning your skin. Carol used to say, "Bob, don't be afraid of being poor. Our son won't remember his father for the money he had, but for the light he brought into this home." And she was right. I worked non-stop so Alex could have books and warm clothes. I didn't want my son to grow up in the dark. Over the years, I watched the city change. Wires turned into networks. Houses grew up, packed tight against each other. I got old. My hands started to shake, my vision to blur. But every time I came home, I'd hear Carol's laugh and see Alex studying at the wooden table. And it was like getting my youth back. Until the day Carol got sick. She passed away one morning during a light rain while I was changing a fuse for a neighbor. When I came running back, she was gone. On the table, her black coffee was half finished, a little steam still rising from the rim of the mug. I sat next to the bed. I took her hand and whispered, "I still have work to do. I'll take care of our boy. I'll live for you." From then on, I stopped climbing poles for the city. I just did small jobs in the neighborhood, just enough to get by. The house became an echo, with the old radio and our wedding photo for company. Alex grew up fast, smart, a smooth talker, with dreams bigger than this city. I was proud. Every time someone praised him, I'd smile and say, "That's the most beautiful light I ever turned on." I didn't know that one day, that same light would end up blinding me. I still remember the day Alex brought her home for the first time. It was an afternoon in June. The sun was hitting the dusty street at a sharp angle. I was wiping down the frame of Carol's wedding picture when I heard a car engine cut off out front. Alex got out, wearing a crisp white shirt, his hair combed back. Behind him, a tall young woman emerged. She wore a blue dress that barely hit her knees and heels that shined like mirrors. "Dad, I want you to meet Jessica." She held out her hand. It was small, soft, but cold as steel. She smiled with red lips, and her eyes scanned my old house like someone looking at an out-of-style item in an expensive store. I told her, "Welcome, daughter. Make yourself at home." She replied softly, "Thank you, sir." How rustic. That word, rustic, sounded to me like an insult wrapped in politeness. That night I made Carol's special chili, her favorite. The smell of cumin and tomato filled the kitchen. Alex ate like he always did, but Jessica barely touched her spoon. She kept looking at her phone, talking about trips, about how small their current apartment was, and their plans to buy a condo in Brentwood. I stayed quiet, nodding now and then, with a strange feeling settling in my chest. After dinner, while I was clearing the table, I heard them talking in the living room. "Your dad is nice, but he doesn't fit, Alex. I don't want our wedding to look poor. Fathers and sons." You think old men can't hear, but I heard every word. I stood behind the door, my hand clenched so tight my knuckles bled. That night, I sat in my rocking chair and looked at Carol's picture in its wooden frame. Her gaze was still sweet, as if she was asking me, "What's wrong, Bob?" I smiled sadly and mumbled, "Nothing, honey. Our boy's just grown up. He loves someone, and we don't get to choose anymore." I picked up the old watch Alex had given me when he was 10. The crystal was scratched, the minute hand moving slowly. I set it on the table. Maybe time is testing me too, I thought. The following weeks, Alex came around less and less. When he called, his voice sounded rushed, distant. I asked him, "Are you happy, son?" He'd reply, "I'm just really busy, Dad. Jessica doesn't like me talking on the phone so much." Cold, sharp, like a line cut with a knife. One night, I was walking past a cell phone store and saw them coming out. She was laughing as Alex held the car door open for her. But when our eyes met, his smile vanished. It was replaced by an icy look. No hello. Just a slight, forced nod. Almost out of obligation. I went home and made my black coffee, just like I have every night since Carol left. The rich aroma filled the air, sweet and bitter at the same time. I took a sip and remembered her words. "Bob, some people only see the light so they can see their own reflection in it, not to warm anyone else." I set the mug down and looked at the yellow bulb on the porch, the same one I've fixed a dozen times, with old wires and a cracked fixture, but it's still burning. And I said to myself, "Let it shine, Carol. Even if nobody looks at it anymore, I'm going to keep it lit." The news of Alex's engagement arrived one September morning, on an invitation printed in shiny silver letters. In the center, their names intertwined, Alex and Jessica. I sat on the porch holding the card, a mix of pride and emptiness in my chest. The words "forever love" glittered in the sun, but inside me, everything was going blurry. Despite that knot in my heart, I felt joy. I thought, my son is starting his family. Carol, do you see this? Our boy is a man now. That night, I opened my savings ledger, the same one where, for 2 years, I'd written down every small deposit with a shaky hand. The barely legible script read, March, electrical repair at Mr. Harrison's, $80. May, new meter install, $120. August, skipped arthritis meds, extra savings, $60. Every number was a day's sweat. Every dollar, an hour on a ladder in the sun. I figured if I kept at it for a few more months, I'd have enough to give my son that honeymoon in Hawaii, the one Jessica was always talking about. I didn't understand luxury resorts or 5-star rooms. I just wanted one simple thing, for them to be happy, for them to see their first sunrise as a married couple and think of me. I started to change my habits. I ate less. I stopped buying the newspaper and just listened to the news on the old radio. Every time my joints ached, I'd take a deep breath and tell myself, hang in there, Bob. Just a few more months. Now and then, I'd look at Carol's picture and smile. You know what, honey? I've still got the strength to be a father. One night, Alex stopped by. He talked about the wedding, the catering, the music, the fresh flowers. His voice was excited, but also distant, like I was just a spectator. I asked him, have you thought about the honeymoon? He smiled. Jessica really wants to go to Hawaii, but it's so expensive, Dad. We'll figure something out. I just nodded silently, but inside, a plan was already forming. The next morning, I went to the bank and opened a special account. The teller asked me what I wanted to name it. I answered without hesitation, for my son's happiness. She smiled, not knowing that for me, it wasn't just an account. It was the last piece of my life dedicated to him. For the last few months of the year, I worked with the energy of a young man. I took any repair job, even when my hands shook. And every time a light bulb flickered on, I thought, this light will be with my son, wherever he goes. The day Alex sent me the hotel information, I felt like an excited kid. I took the old watch he'd given me when he was 10 and set it next to the bank transfer slip, as if connecting 2 generations. I made my coffee, breathed in the rich aroma, and whispered, Carol, we kept our promise. Our son is going to have a new beginning. I didn't know that just one day later, that joy would turn into the coldest shock of my life. That morning, the sky was clear, and the sun was hitting the rooftops of Nashville, covering them in gold. I got up early, shaved, combed my hair, and put on a fresh, ironed white shirt. In my pocket, carefully folded, was the paper with the account number for the hotel where Alex and Jessica would be spending their honeymoon. Today was the day I'd make the transfer, the gift that took me 2 years to save. Before leaving the house, I stopped on the porch, in front of Carol's wedding photo. She was smiling with that sweetness she never lost. I spoke to her softly. "Honey, I finally kept my promise. Our son's going to have his own home." The bank was crowded. The air smelled like perfume mixed with freshly printed paper, and the sound of the cash counting machines set the rhythm of the morning. I waited in line, paper in hand, my heart pounding like I was about to do something monumental. My whole life, I was never afraid of heights or electricity, but that day, surrounded by fluorescent lights and numbers, my heart was trembling. When it was my turn, I went to the counter and pulled out my phone to enter the code. The young teller smiled. "Domestic transfer, Mr. Miller?" I nodded. "Yes, ma'am. It's for my son." I looked at the screen. $40,000. All it took was one tap, and the money would be in my son's hands. I took a deep breath and managed a smile. I pictured Alex's face when he got the notification. Maybe he'd get emotional, call me, say a simple "thank you." That would be enough. Then my phone vibrated. I thought it was the bank's confirmation message. It wasn't. The screen showed a few ice-cold, cruel lines. "Dad, don't even bother coming to the wedding. Jessica doesn't want you there. Says you'll ruin everything." I froze. The numbers on the bank's screen went blurry. My heart leapt into my throat. The teller was saying something, but my ears were filled with the sound of my own breathing. Ruin everything. Ruin it all. Suddenly, I remembered when Alex was a kid and fell off his bike, breaking his arm. I spent 3 nights in the hospital. No sleep, just watching his fever. And now, that same boy I had carried on my shoulders was telling me my presence was an embarrassment. I slowly sat down in a chair. The transfer slip fell to the floor. My mind was a slideshow of memories. Carol's laugh, the 3 of us at the small dinner table, Alex's tiny hand gripping my finger. It was all vanishing like smoke. I opened the banking app again. My fingers were shaking, but this time it wasn't to send. I selected Cancel Transaction. The screen asked, "Are you sure?" "Are you sure, sir?" I pressed, "Yes." Then I blocked Alex's number. When I walked out of the bank, the sun was still shining brightly, but my entire sky had just collapsed. On the sidewalk, a father and his son walked by, laughing. The boy was holding up an ice cream cone like it was a trophy. That laugh shot through my chest like 100 burning needles. I crumpled the unsent slip in my hand and mumbled. I just wanted to be there, even if I had to sit in the back row. I was swallowed up by the crowd. Nashville was still loud and alive, but for me, the world had just gone dark. I got home as the evening was setting in. The house was completely silent. The only sound was the tick-tock of the old clock in the corner, the one Alex gave me when he was 10. Every tick sounded like a reminder. Time doesn't stop, even when people's hearts change. I sat in the rocking chair where Carol used to knit. The cushion sank, just barely, as if she were still there, tilting her head to ask me, "Tough day, Bob?" I smiled sadly. "No, honey, just learned a lesson a little too late." I took out the bank slip. The numbers were printed with a cold, metallic clarity. I folded it and put it in the drawer under our wedding photo, next to our tarnished silver rings. Some things you keep, not because they have value, but because it hurts too much to look at them. Night fell. I turned on the old radio. Unchained Melody was playing, the song Carol used to hum while she cooked. The old voice, mixed with the breeze from the porch, squeezed my heart. I closed my eyes and pictured her next to me, her hand on my shoulder, saying softly, "Bob, don't hold a grudge against your son. Just don't lose yourself." I opened my eyes. On the table, my cup of coffee was half empty. The rich aroma had gone cold. I took a bitter sip. That taste brought me back to reality. My son had erased me from his life, not with yelling, but with the absolute silence of a text message. I looked around the room. Every object held a memory. The wooden chair I'd built, the pencil mark on the wall tracking Alex's height in first grade, the light switch I rewired after Carol died. Everything was still there. Only my son was gone. I didn't cry. Tears don't wash away a wound this deep. I just sat there, listening to the distant traffic, the barking dogs, the leaves rustling in the yard. Nashville was still alive. I was just learning to breathe on my own. When the clock struck 9, I stood up. The night air smelled like damp earth and wood smoke from the neighbors' chimneys. I looked up at the sky. A single star was shining through the dark. I clasped my hands behind my back and mumbled, "Starting tomorrow, Bob, you live for you, not for anyone else." I turned off the radio. I turned off the lights, leaving only the yellow bulb on the porch. That little light I promised Carol I'd keep lit. For the first time in many years, I didn't pray for my son. I prayed for myself, for the strength to move on, not with a broken heart, but with dignity. In the darkness, I heard the wind whistle through the window. It wasn't cold anymore. It was a strange, peaceful silence. That was the night I stayed awake, and it was the night I stopped being a blind father. The next morning, I woke when the sun hit the doorframe, painting the yellow walls gold. My eyes felt heavy, like I hadn't slept at all. Outside, the familiar sound of the mail truck making its rounds. Everything seemed the same as yesterday, except for me. I wasn't the old man who just quietly endured anymore. I was a man who had just had his dignity stolen. The sun warmed the air, bringing Carol's image to mind, but this time I didn't let the tears come. I'd cried enough. On the table, the phone sat motionless, its black screen reflecting my face. A father uninvited to his own son's wedding. I took a sip of coffee and stood up. In the mirror I saw my eyes. They were still clear, with a sharpness my son had forgotten. I put on my jacket. Nashville was having a bright morning, the sky washed clean. I walked straight to the bank, the same one where I'd frozen yesterday. This time I wasn't shaking. The teller from yesterday looked surprised to see me. "Another transfer, Mr. Miller?" I shook my head. "No, today I want to lock all my accounts. Nobody moves a dime without me being physically present." The girl looked puzzled for a second, then nodded. "Of course, sir. We can do that." She printed several forms, and I signed every page with a firm hand. Each signature felt like hammering a nail into a broken trust. When she was done, she smiled and gave me a receipt. "All set, Mr. Miller. Nobody can touch your money." I nodded, mumbling, "Thank you, ma'am." Nobody, not even my own son. I walked out of the bank with a strange feeling, like a man who just got a noose off his neck. I looked up and the sky seemed higher. The wind moved the old trees on the avenue, and I heard my own sigh. It was light, decisive. On the way back, I stopped by Mrs. Rita's corner store, the same one Carol used to shop at. "Haven't seen you in a while, Mr. Miller. Everything okay?" "Just fine, Rita. Just learned how to hold on to what's mine." She smiled, not quite understanding, and wished me a good day. I smiled back with a strange calm. That evening, I sat in the rocking chair again and turned on the worn-out radio. The news was on, but I wasn't listening. I was only thinking one thing: nobody, not even my son, will ever make me feel small again. I looked at the porch light. The yellow bulb was still warm, flickering in the wind. Like me. Maybe old, maybe weak, but never going out. I felt free, as if Carol was standing right behind me. "I did it, honey. From now on, I'll live for me." And under the bright red sunset, for the first time in years, I felt truly free. That afternoon, it was drizzling. The rain in Nashville isn't like it used to be. It doesn't pour. It just mists, enough to wet your shoulders and kick up that earthy, sour smell from the pavement. I was changing the bulb on the porch when the phone vibrated in my pocket. An unknown number. I hesitated, then answered. "Mr. Miller? This is Jessica." Her voice was cold as ice water. I stayed silent. "I'm calling because Alex is worried. He said he still hasn't received the transfer for the honeymoon." I wiped my hands on an old rag and answered slowly. "Jessica, listen to me closely. There isn't going to be any transfer. If you call me about money again, I'll talk to a lawyer." I heard her inhale sharply. Then her tone shifted to that sour sweetness I knew so well. "Sir, don't be like that. We just wanted to live our dream. You know how much that trip meant to Alex." I smiled, just barely. "Then you tell him that sometimes dreams aren't built with money. They're built with respect." There was a moment of silence. Then, her dry laugh. "Fine, Mr. Miller. Have it your way. Just remember, your son won't forget this when he realizes you ruined his wedding." Click. The line went dead. I stood there under the porch, listening to the rain dripping from the old gutters. I felt no anger, just a deep, profound weariness. The way she said, your son," like he was a piece of property. I went to the table and pulled out an old photo of Alex at 10 years old. In the picture, he was wearing his school uniform, smiling brightly, holding the watch I'd bought with my first real paycheck. I ran my fingers over the image. My voice came out cracked. "Son, I thought loving you was enough to make you understand. Maybe I was wrong. Some things shine brighter than love, and people get dazzled." I put the photo down. I made a pot of coffee. I could have sworn I heard Carol's voice. "Don't let your kindness become your humiliation, Bob." I nodded, looking at the glowing bulb in the corner of the kitchen. The rain stopped. I went out on the porch and looked at the wet street. The neighborhood kids were running through the drizzle, laughing. One of them saw me and waved. "Mr. Miller, aren't you cold?" "No, son, I'm plenty warm in here." I knew I had to defend what little I had left. Before bed, I checked my phone. One unread message from Alex. "Dad, people are saying you're losing your mind. If you don't fix this, I'm going to find another way." I stared at the sentence for a long time and smiled bitterly. Another way. Another way sounded like a threat. I deleted the message and turned off the phone. That night, I didn't dream of Carol or of a smiling little Alex. I was just in my house, yellow, warm, quiet. And I repeated to myself, "You can forget me, son, but I will never forget myself again." The next morning dawned clear after the night's rain. The drops left on the porch leaves sparkled like tiny bits of glass. I sat at the kitchen table, listening to the news on the radio, stirring my coffee. The phone rang. I looked at the screen. Alex. I hesitated, then answered. His voice was low, measured, loaded with control. "Dad, I don't understand why you're doing this. I've told everyone you're not well, that you don't know what you're doing anymore. Don't make me act on this. You won't like it." I closed my eyes and took a deep breath. That wasn't the voice of the boy I taught to count. It was the voice of a cold man to whom I owed nothing. "If that's all you called to say, then we have nothing more to talk about." I heard a sigh on the other end, and then his tone hardened. "Fine. If you won't help me, I'll find someone who will. I can prove you're no longer fit to manage your own affairs. You know exactly what I'm talking about." I was silent for a few seconds. A ray of sun cut through the window and hit my face. I wasn't scared. He had turned my love into a weapon. I replied quietly, "If you think you can take away what I've built over a lifetime, you go ahead and try. But don't forget, I've still got enough memory to tell everyone the truth." A few seconds of silence and he hung up. I left the phone on the table. The hole in my chest felt different. It wasn't pain anymore. It was clarity. From his tone, I knew he was serious. That other way he'd warned about wasn't a metaphor. It was a courthouse. I knew what I had to do. That same afternoon, I went to see Mr. Davis, my neighbor, the neighborhood lawyer. An older man, serious but fair. He'd helped a lot of folks with property deeds. When I told him everything, he listened silently for a long time. Finally, he said calmly, "Mr. Miller, you did the right thing not transferring the money, but now you have to be smarter. We're going to protect your assets, legally, paper by paper, signature by signature. Your son might be clever, but we know the law better than he does." He poured 2 cups of black coffee and pushed one toward me. "First, we're drafting a limited power of attorney that states only you can manage your assets. I'm also scheduling a full medical evaluation to certify your mental and physical health. If anyone tries to declare you incompetent, we'll have the proof to shut them down immediately." I nodded and thanked him. As I signed the first few documents, my hand wasn't shaking anymore. Something strong was growing inside me. It wasn't spite. It was the instinct to survive. On the way home, I stopped at the bakery and bought 2 small donuts. I didn't eat them. I placed them on the table next to Carol's picture. "I've started, honey. I may be old, but I haven't forgotten how to protect my own light." That night, I sat in the rocker and wrote a few lines in my old notebook. "If anyone ever tries to take your dignity, remember, dignity isn't in your wallet. It's in the memory of what you did right." The porch light was still on, and I knew that tonight I wouldn't be afraid of the dark. 4 days later, around noon, I heard a car stop hard out front, the sharp slam of a car door, and a harsh voice yelling, "Dad!" I recognized it instantly. The same voice I'd heard thousands of times when he was a kid, running through the house to show me a good grade or ask for comic book money. But today, it sounded different, heavy, strange, like it belonged to someone who wasn't part of me anymore. I opened the door. There was Alex in a white shirt, dark pants, and shined shoes, now covered in a bit of street dust. His face was so calm, it was unsettling. "Dad, we need to talk," he said, his voice tight. I leaned on the door frame, arms crossed. "Talk from there. You don't need to come in." He frowned. "Dad, don't do this. I don't want to argue, but you have to understand. What you did is causing problems. I already paid the deposit for the trip. If we cancel, I lose everything." I didn't change my tone. "That's your problem. I don't owe you a honeymoon." He took a step forward. Something flashed in his eyes. "Who's been filling your head with this? That old lawyer? Your neighbors? They're turning you against me, don't you see?" I shook my head. "Nobody's turning me. I'm just learning to protect myself." That shut him up for a few seconds. Then the anger rose in his face, and he slammed his fist on the iron gate. The bang echoed down the whole block. "Really, Dad? After everything I've done, you're treating me like a stranger?" I looked him straight in the eye and said, slowly, each word a hammer blow, "Everything you've done has been for you, never for me." He froze. The anger on his face shifted into something deeper, a mix of hurt and resentment. "Fine," he muttered, his voice low. "If you won't help me, I'll do it my way. I'll tell the judge you're not in your right mind. We'll see who's right then." Every word hit me like a hammer on bone. My son, the boy I carried through the rain, was now threatening me with the law. I didn't move. I answered calmly, "If you think you can win by humiliating the man who gave you life, you go ahead and try. But remember, I've still got enough memory to tell people exactly who you are." He didn't say anything else. His eyes lost focus for a second. Then he turned, yanked open his car door, slammed it shut, and tore off down the street, engine roaring. I stood there for a long time, watching the exhaust smoke hang in the narrow street. My heart wasn't angry anymore, just cold, a cold that chilled me to the bone. I went inside and made another cup of coffee. The aroma filled the room like a hug, but it couldn't chase away the emptiness. I looked at Carol's picture on the shelf and mumbled. I taught him how to walk, but I forgot to teach him how to come back. As evening fell, I went to the porch and turned on the yellow bulb. The wind whistled through the tangled wires of the neighborhood, wires whose knots I knew by heart. Now it was my turn to learn how to reconnect my own threads after this painful break, and I swore that, old and weak as I might be, I wouldn't let anyone, not even my son, put out the light that was left in my heart. 3 weeks after that confrontation, the mailman knocked on my door. He handed me a thick envelope, sealed with the red stamp of the state courthouse. I opened it and read the first few lines. My heart felt like it stopped. A petition for conservatorship. Alex Miller was petitioning for legal guardianship of his father, Robert Miller, citing loss of mental faculties. I slumped into a chair. My own son. He'd actually done it. It wasn't just an angry threat. He had filed a document with the court claiming I was crazy, that I was no longer capable of managing what was mine. I held the letter. My hands were shaking, but my eyes were steady. In that instant, I felt two opposite things. Part of me wanted to cry. The other part, strangely, felt relieved. At least, now, I knew exactly who my son was. The next morning, I took the letter to Mr. Davis's office. The moment I walked in, he knew. They moved faster than I expected, he said calmly. But luckily, so did we. He opened a file cabinet and pulled out a thick blue folder. Inside, the documents were perfectly organized. Medical certificate of mental capacity, notarized deeds of property, proof of health, all signed and sealed last week. Mr. Miller, here is your shield, he said, pushing the folder toward me. We'll present this to the judge, and if we have to, my doctor will testify in person. I nodded. Thank you, Mr. Davis. I'm learning that light doesn't always come from electricity. Sometimes it comes from the person brave enough to turn it on themselves. He smiled, a serene smile. Your light never went out, Bob. It was just behind a cloud. The day of the hearing, I got up early. I put on the dark blue shirt that Carol loved most. Before I left, I looked at myself in the mirror for a long time. I didn't want to look like a frail old man. I wanted to look like a man, a father who didn't need pity. The courtroom was cold, lit by fluorescent lights that made the wooden benches creak. On the other side sat Alex and Jessica, impeccable, composed. He avoided my gaze, but I could still see her small, contained smile, the smile of someone who's sure they've already won. The judge read the file in a monotone voice. The petition claims Mr. Robert Miller is mentally incapable of managing his assets. My son's young lawyer stood up and started talking, slinging words like knives, frequent forgetfulness, erratic behavior, financial risk. I felt like every sentence was stripping away a layer of my own history. Then, Mr. Davis stood up. His voice was deep, slow, but firm. Your Honor, here are the medical certificates proving my client is in full command of his faculties. Here are the notarized documents proving his responsible management of his assets for years. And here, the monthly expense ledgers, detailed and cross-referenced with receipts. He presented each page, one by one, like someone turning the lights back on in a dark room. When the judge gave me the floor, I stood up. I clasped my hands and spoke slowly. Your Honor, my name is Robert Miller. I'm 76 years old, and I was an electrician my whole life. I don't need anyone to keep my memories for me. I've climbed hundreds of utility poles. I know every wire in this city. If someone now says I've lost my mind, let me prove them wrong with facts, not pity. The courtroom was silent. Alex looked down. Jessica pressed her lips together. The judge looked at me for a long time and then nodded. The court denies the petition for conservatorship. Case closed. I didn't celebrate. I didn't sigh. I just closed my eyes. And in the darkness behind my eyelids, I saw Carol smiling. I hadn't won because of the papers. I'd won because I still remembered who I was. On the way out, Mr. Davis put a hand on my shoulder. Now you know, Bob. Justice can be slow, but it isn't blind. I nodded, looking up at the Nashville sky. It was bright. And for the first time in weeks, that light didn't feel harsh. It felt warm. I thought that after the hearing, things would quiet down. I thought Alex, after losing in court, would feel ashamed and just stay silent. I was wrong. When a heart is covered in that much ambition, defeat doesn't stop it. It just makes it crueler. One morning, I was drinking coffee on the porch when Art, my neighbor from 2 houses down, called over the fence. "Mr. Miller, you doing okay? I've been hearing some ugly things about you." I looked up. "What things, Art?" He looked uncomfortable. "Well, they're saying you're not all there, that you forget to lock your door, that you're giving valuable things away to strangers, that you're talking to yourself at the market. They're also saying the court had to get involved because you lost your mind." I smiled bitterly. "And who's saying all this?" Art avoided my gaze. "People are saying it's Alex and his new wife." I sat in silence. The wind rustled the tin roof with a cold whisper. I didn't blame Art. He was just the messenger. But every word, a stone dropped on my chest. After he left, I sat there for a long time. I felt an invisible hand squeezing my heart, slow and steady. That afternoon, I decided I wouldn't be silent anymore. I went to the notary's office in the neighborhood. The clerk, who knew me by now, was surprised. "Mr. Miller, what do you need now?" "I want to draft a declaration. A short one. Just to make it clear I'm still lucid and have rights over my property." The young woman nodded and gave me a form. I wrote with a slow but firm hand. "I, Robert Miller, born in 1947, retain full memory and capacity to act. Any rumor to the contrary is false and serves a malicious purpose." I signed it and asked them to notarize it. When the red seal was stamped on the document, I felt like I'd rebuilt the fence around my honor. But I knew a piece of paper wouldn't be enough. That night, I propped my phone up on the table, adjusted the camera, and sat in my rocking chair with the peeling yellow wall behind me. The porch light cast shadows on my wrinkled face, but my eyes were still bright. I hit record. "My name is Robert Miller. I'm 76 years old, and I'm a retired electrician. I'm in my home in Nashville, lucid, conscious, and living a normal life. I know there are rumors going around that I've lost my mind. I'm here to tell you, that is a lie. I still make my own coffee. I still do electrical repairs, and I remember every day of my life. Anyone who says otherwise is trying to take away my good name." I paused, looked straight at the lens, and added, my voice trembling just slightly, "I don't need pity. I just need respect." I stopped the recording and sent the video to a few trusted friends and neighbors. They shared it. A few hours later, the first messages came in. "Mr. Miller, we saw it. You're still our Mr. Miller. Don't worry about wagging tongues. Honest people aren't afraid of shadows." I read every line. My heart felt warm, but it also ached, because I knew Alex and Jessica wouldn't stop. They couldn't stand to see me still standing after everything they'd tried. That night I sat by the door, watching the yellow porch light on the street. I wondered how many fathers in the world were being slandered by their own children, just like me. Then I remembered Carol's words. "Bob, when they can't take what you have, they try to take your name." I took a deep breath, watching the bulb flicker in the wind. "No, Carol," I whispered. "They can take the money. They can dirty my reputation, but they will never, ever take me from myself." One morning early in the week, while I was trimming the cactus pots on the porch, 2 men in dark suits walked up the driveway. They asked for my name, polite but distant. "Excuse me, are you Mr. Robert Miller?" I wiped my hands and nodded. "We're from the National Bank. We need to verify some loans taken out in your name. There are some irregularities in the file." I frowned. "What loans?" The taller one opened a folder and showed me. On the page, I clearly saw my name, my social security number, my address, my signature. Identical, except I had never signed any such paper. Loan amount, $90,000. Purpose, home remodeling. I stood frozen for a second and then exhaled. Do you really think an old man living alone needs $90,000 to remodel this house? The younger employee hesitated. It seemed odd to us too, sir, but the file has a signature and a copy of your ID. It all matches. By rule, we have to confirm with the account holder. I looked at the paper one more time and understood. I didn't need anyone to say his name. In my mind, there was only one. Alex, I invited them in. I got them water. While they sat, I opened the closet and pulled out my original folder, the authentic documents, organized by Mr. Davis. Here are my real papers. Compare them. The signature on that loan is not mine. I have never applied for any credit. If the bank gave out that money, someone has stolen my identity. They looked at each other and took quick notes. Thank you, sir. We'll inform our internal investigation department. We may need you to come to the branch to verify. I nodded. I'll be there. But I'm also going to the police. When they left, I sat down with the photocopy of the fake signature in my hand. The handwriting was so close to mine. Just a slight tremor at the end. It looked real enough to fool anyone. I sighed and muttered, "Son, you got too good. So good you even know how to forge your own father's hand." That afternoon, I went to the police station to file a report. A young officer took my statement. After listening, he started writing. "Do you suspect anyone, Mr. Miller?" I looked out the window, where the afternoon light was turning golden, and replied, "I don't have proof, but the only person who wants to see me with nothing is just one." He nodded. "This is serious. We'll request the bank trace the money. If it's identity theft, there will be a criminal investigation." I smiled, tired. "Thank you, son. I don't want to see anyone in jail. I just want to keep my name." On the way home, I passed Mrs. Rita's bakery and bought 2 warm rolls. "Out and about this late?" she asked. "Yes, Rita. Sometimes you go out, not to buy, but to remind yourself you can still walk." She smiled, not fully understanding, and gave me an extra bag. "Take it. The bread's good today." I got home as it was getting dark. The yellow porch light was on, reflecting on the old wall where Carol's picture hangs. I sat in the rocker with the bread in my hand and spoke to her portrait. I thought I understood people, but maybe I only understood light, not darkness. There are hands you raise yourself that end up cutting the very tie that binds a father to his son. I closed my eyes as the old song on the radio filled the room, along with the smell of warm bread. And in the middle of that small room, I understood something. I wasn't an old man just taking hits anymore. I was the last one in this house willing to fight for its honor. The next day, I went to Mr. Davis's office to tell him about the fraudulent loan. As I spoke, he frowned and drummed his fingers on the desk. "I knew it," he muttered. "Nobody except your son has that much information on you. But luckily, the bank alerted you in time. Otherwise, your house would already have a lien on it." I nodded slowly. "I don't know whether to call it bad luck or the last favor the world has for me." He wrote a few lines on a piece of paper and handed it to me. "Bob, I want you to meet an old friend of mine. His name is Frank Lewis. He used to be an accountant for a real estate agency. And now he works for your son. If anyone knows what's really happening with your assets, it's him." That same afternoon, I looked up Frank. We'd been friends years ago when we both worked on electrical crews. When he saw me, his jaw dropped. "Bob? My goodness. How many years has it been? I thought you'd retired and were living the quiet life." I smiled sadly. I was, until someone decided not to leave me in peace. We sat in a small coffee shop downtown. I told him everything. The trial, the rumors, the fake loan, Alex's maneuvers. Frank listened in silence, nodding now and then. Finally, he lowered his voice, looking around as if afraid of being overheard. "Bob, I have to be honest. I work as an accountant for Alex. And yes, there are shady things happening at his company. Last week, I saw him in a meeting with a real estate broker, alongside his wife. They were talking about property transfers, and your name came up. When I asked, he just said, 'It's old family paperwork. Don't worry about it.' I just looked at him, saying nothing. Inside, I felt something deflate, like the air was leaking out of my lungs. Frank looked down and continued, 'I can't get involved directly, but I can help you get copies of some documents. If I do it without permission, I could lose my job, but I'm not going to stand by and watch him cheat you.' I put a hand on his shoulder, my voice cracking. 'Thank you, Frank. I don't need proof for revenge. I just want the truth, so I can look my son in the eye without shame.' A few days later, Frank sent me an envelope. Inside were copies of falsified property transfer contracts with obviously forged signatures. Every page was like a punch. Painful, but clarifying. I took everything to Mr. Davis's office. After reviewing the documents, he hit the desk with his fist. 'That's enough. This is sufficient to file a criminal complaint for forgery and financial fraud.' I asked him, 'And could that send Alex to jail?' He sighed. 'It's possible, but sometimes justice has to hurt before someone wakes up.' I left the office just as it started to rain. The cold drops hit my shoulders, but my mind was clearer than ever. I walked through the wet streets, the smell of earth and car exhaust mixing in the air. That night, I sat by the window and turned on the radio. An old ballad was playing, the singer repeating, 'Even if it breaks my soul, I'm keeping my promise.' I whispered to Carol, 'I'm not doing this out of spite, honey. Maybe this will hurt our son. But if the truth can save him from the darkness, it's not vengeance, it's love.' On the porch, the yellow light was still on, casting flickering reflections on the window's iron frame. And I understood that sometimes the real light only reveals itself after the storm has passed. That morning, when I opened the porch door, the mailman was there again. He handed me another thick envelope with the red seal of the Nashville Civil Court. I didn't even need to open it. It was a new problem. I tore it open and read the first lines. My hands went cold. By court order, a temporary freeze is decreed on the accounts of Mr. Robert Miller. "Freeze my accounts?" I whispered, rereading it to make sure. I sat down. The paper trembled in my fingers. My bank, blocked. All my savings, my pension, everything, suspended, pending financial investigation. I understood immediately. This was the next blow from Alex and Jessica. I put on my jacket and went straight to Mr. Davis's office. He was reading the newspaper. When he saw me, he set it aside. "They won't stop," he said grimly. "They want you to get tired. They want you to break down before the process is over." I handed him the letter. "If my money is frozen, what do I live on?" He looked at me with a stern smile. "On trust, Bob. I'll file an appeal immediately. We have plenty of proof, but we have to be patient." He immediately dialed a contact at the courthouse. While he waited, he poured me a cup of black coffee. The bitter aroma filled the room. We sat facing each other. Two old men fighting a war that seems reserved for the young. The light came through the blinds, illuminating the stacks of files. "They're young. They have money," he said. "But we have time and the truth. And the truth, Bob, doesn't get tired." I went home in the afternoon. I walked past the bank. The teller who knew me gave me a look of pity and lowered her eyes. I just smiled and nodded. No need to ask. They'd already received the order. When I got home, I sat at the table and looked around. not a single bill unfiled, not a single number out of place. I had lived my life too orderly for someone to twist my truth with a few fake papers. When night fell, I made 2 cups of coffee, just like always. I put one in front of Carol's empty chair. The other I held in my hands. The rich aroma mixed with the sound of rain in the yard. I whispered, "Honey, I'm not angry with our son. I just regret that he doesn't understand. The most dangerous thing isn't poverty. It's selling your soul for profit." I carefully folded the court order and put it in the file folder. I turned off the lights, leaving only the yellow porch bulb illuminating the wall. In the middle of the night, I heard distant thunder, heavy rain. A calm thought came to me. If they think I'm going to break, they forgot. The man who climbed poles in a thunderstorm isn't afraid of the wind. 3 days after my accounts were frozen, I received another envelope. This time, not from the bank, but from the county property registrar. In the center of the document, one phrase in capital letters hit me in the eyes. Notification of preventive lien on the property located at 14 Maple Street. I had to read it 3 times to believe it. My house. The house that Carol and I had built with our own hands. It was under a court-ordered lien. I dropped the paper and sank into my chair. The ticking of the clock sounded like needles on my skin. In my mind, I saw Carol, her hands covered in drywall dust, smiling when we finished the roof. This house is small, but it will be full of laughter. And now, that laughter felt like it was about to be erased from memory. That afternoon, I walked through every room. Every corner held a lifetime. The small kitchen where Carol cooked chili on rainy days. The dining room table with the Alex age 8 carving I never wanted to sand away. My old rocking chair, worn down by the years. Everything felt fragile, as if at any moment they could dismantle it, piece by piece. I picked up the phone and called Mr. Davis. His voice on the other end was still calm. "Don't panic, Bob. It's a temporary measure. I filed the appeal this morning. But you have to be ready. You'll have to go to trial again." I asked, my voice thin, "And if I lose, Mr. Davis, can they really take my house?" "If we let them, yes. But if you stand firm, nobody can take what you built with your own hands." I hung up. The evening light filtered through the window, spreading across the old tile floor. I walked slowly through the house, as if saying goodbye to every wall, every brick. When I got to the living room, I stopped in front of the wedding photo. I touched Carol's face in the frame and whispered, my voice shaking, "Honey, they want to take our house, but I swear they won't be able to take its soul." I didn't sleep that night. I opened my old notebook and wrote a few lines. People can forge signatures and documents, but nobody can forge the sweat that was spilled on every single brick. The next morning I was at the courthouse. The room was full, lit by cold, white lights. I stood before the judge, the folder of authentic documents in my hand. When it was my turn to speak, I didn't look at my son. I just looked straight ahead and said, "Your Honor, this house isn't just property. It's where I buried my love, my memory, and my youth. I don't have a fancy education, but I know this. Whoever uses fake papers to steal it is stealing an entire life." The room was silent. The judge nodded slowly and asked for my statement to be entered into the record. On the way home, I crossed the small park. The wind rustled my white hair. My heart felt lighter, strangely at peace. I knew that, whatever the outcome, I had spoken for all the old folks the world considers useless. We still remember, and we still have value. That night, I turned on the porch light, brighter than usual. The yellow light reflected warmly on the wall. Because even if they took everything, I still had the light of my determination. The one thing no court could ever put a lien on. I thought that after the last hearing, Alex would stay quiet. But just 2 days later, the rumors started circulating among the neighbors. At the corner store, I heard Mrs. Rita whisper to another woman, They say Mr. Miller is really losing it, isn't he? His son is looking for a nursing home for him. My coffee cup stopped halfway to my mouth. I didn't turn around. I just kept walking, my heart on fire. I knew perfectly well who had planted those words. Alex couldn't beat me in court, so now he was trying to destroy me with gossip. That same afternoon, I went to see Mr. Davis. He was reviewing some freshly printed documents. He sighed when he saw me. I know. They're paying for false witnesses. They're claiming you forget names, dates, that you act strangely. They want to reopen the case on your mental capacity. I sat down slowly. Then let's find some real witnesses. He looked at me and smiled with approval. That's exactly what I was going to suggest. The next day, I visited Mrs. Rita and Art, my neighbors for my entire life. I told them everything without exaggerating or omitting a thing. They both listened, wide-eyed. Rita took my hand, tears welling up. Mr. Miller, I know better than anyone that you're more lucid than all of us. You still fix the lights in the neighborhood and you remember every kid's name. I will testify for you. Art added firmly, Me too. We have coffee together every morning. A crazy man can't talk politics and remember Sunday's game scores. 3 days later, the new hearing was packed. On the other side, Alex and Jessica sat, serious, impeccable. Their witnesses went first, people who claimed they'd seen me talking to myself, that I confused the days, that I forgot my own family's names. I listened to it all in silence. When Mr. Davis gave me the signal, I stood up calmly. Your Honor, I don't need to justify myself, but if the court allows, I'd like those who truly know me to speak. The door opened. Rita and Art walked in. She spoke first. I've lived next to Mr. Miller for 20 years. Every morning he's fixing wires, helping everyone. He's not just lucid. He's the only one on the block who knows every kid's name. He hasn't forgotten anything. He's only forgotten how to hold a grudge. The whole room was silent. Then Art added, If losing your mind means remembering every power bill and every street in Nashville, then I hope I lose my mind just like he has. A few people chuckled, and then there was absolute silence. The judge nodded, picked up his pen, and signed a new document. The court recognizes the full legal capacity of Mr. Robert Miller. An investigation for perjury will be opened. Alex went pale. Jessica gripped her purse. I just looked at them, not with anger or pride, just sadness. Two young people who had sold their dignity for a few lines on a piece of paper. On the way out, Mr. Davis clapped my shoulder and smiled. Now they'll understand. Sometimes silence is also a way of fighting back. I nodded. Yes, Mr. Davis. And I'll stay silent until the light itself reveals who's still hiding in the shadows. That afternoon, Nashville was baking under an intense red sun. The light hit the roof of my house like fire. But it was a different kind of fire. The fire of pride. The kind that's no longer afraid of going out. I thought everything was over when the court rejected the lies, but there are those who, once they fall too deep into ambition, no longer know how to stop. One morning, Mr. Davis called me to his office. On his desk was a new stack of papers. He pushed it toward me, his voice grave. Bob, they're suing you again. This time they're accusing you of psychological abuse and family abandonment. I looked at him, thinking I'd misheard. Abandonment? I raised my son alone since my wife died. I never left him. Not for one single day. Mr. Davis sighed, opening the file. The complaint alleges that you exerted emotional pressure on Alex, that you forced him to leave home, and caused him psychological damage. They even have 3 witnesses, friends of your son. I let out a bitter laugh. I suppose they forgot to mention that I was also the one who fed him, the one who sold my car to pay for his wife's hospital bills when they got married. The lawyer nodded calmly. I'll handle it, but you can testify if you want. I think it's time for you to say what you've never said. The day of the trial, I brought a photograph. Alex and me in front of the house when he was 10, holding a kite, smiling with his whole face. When the judge asked me to speak, I stood up slowly. My voice came out firm, though quiet. Your Honor, they say I abandoned my son. But I ask you, does a father who abandons his son still remember every scar on his son's knee? Does a father who abandons him still keep his photo by his bed for 40 years? I held up the photograph. My hand shook, just a little. I took him to the hospital when he fell. I worked 3 shifts so he could go to a good school. If that's a psychological abuse, then charge me, because the only way I knew how to love was by giving him everything I had. The courtroom was silent. I looked at Alex. His gaze flickered, but he quickly looked down, avoiding my eyes. Jessica squeezed his hand, as if afraid he'd break. The judge spoke, his voice measured. The court finds no evidence of abuse or abandonment. Case closed. I bowed my head in thanks. Walking out, the midday sun was burning, and the wind carried dust and the smell of the city. I took a deep breath. On the way home, I told myself, people can win with words, but they can't win with lies forever. The truth, sooner or later, always finds its way back home. I looked up at the blue sky, where the light cut through the thin clouds. The light, the only thing they could never, ever tarnish. After the last trial, I thought my heart would feel lighter, but the wounds left by your own blood don't close that fast. Even though the truth was proven, I was still living among whispers. The old man who won the lawsuit against his son. Poor thing. He should have just forgiven him. People talk a lot, but nobody understands that for me, forgiving isn't weakness. It's the only way not to drown in the pain. That evening, I sat in front of the house, watching the sunset paint the whole street red. The wind smelled like earth and wood smoke. Then I heard a soft knock on the gate. I went to open it, and I couldn't believe it. It was Alex. He was thinner, with an unkempt beard and a wrinkled shirt. His eyes, once so full of confidence, were now just tired and scared. "Dad," he said, his voice breaking, I came to ask for your forgiveness." I stood there in silence. In my mind, a lifetime of images flashed by. The night he had a fever and I carried him through the hospital hallways. The day he got into college. And I kissed his forehead with pride. And now, this same man stood before me, head bowed like a repentant child. "I have nothing left to reproach you for," I answered, my voice heavy. "But son, do you know what you took from me? It wasn't the money. It was the trust. And that, Alex, that's the hardest thing to get back." He nodded, his eyes red. "I know. It all spun out of control. Jessica, she left. She took the money and left me with all the debt. I'm not here to ask for help. I just want you to know that I finally understand." I looked at him, and in that exhaustion I saw a glimmer of the boy he used to be. I went back in the house, opened a drawer and took out an envelope I'd kept for a long time. A letter I'd written right after he sued me. I handed it to him. "I wrote this back then, but I never had the courage to give it to you. I think it's time." He opened it and read it in silence. It was just a few lines. "I don't hate you, because hate would make me just like you. I only hope that one day you understand. Greed can never buy you peace." When he finished reading, Alex broke down. He fell to his knees, hugging my legs, sobbing. "Dad, forgive me. Please." I put a hand on his shoulder and said, my voice rough, "Get up. We're both old. We're both tired. Forgiveness isn't about forgetting, son. It's about being able to keep living." The Nashville sky was turning violet. We sat there on the doorstep together, not saying anything. And in that silence, I felt a wound inside me finally start to close, not with joy, but with the serene calm of a father who has finally learn to let go. The next morning, I woke up earlier than usual. The dawn light filtered through the window and washed the yellow wall, old but warm, where Carol's wedding photo still hung. She was smiling in the frame, sweet as ever, as if she was still watching every step I take. I looked at her for a long time and murmured, "Honey, it's over. Our son came back. He's not the same, but at least he's learned how to bow his head." I went out to the porch and made 2 cups of coffee. I put one on the empty chair next to me, the place where, in my mind, Carol still sits every morning. The steam rose, mixing the rich aroma with the cool morning air. Alex came out, his eyes still swollen. He sat across from me and looked at the cup in front of him. "I don't know what to say, Dad." I smiled softly. "You don't have to say anything. Sometimes, silence is the most sincere apology." We sat there, listening to the birds on the roof and the distant call of the paperboy. We didn't look at each other much, but the distance was gone. There was just silence. A silence that didn't hurt anymore. It healed. After a while, Alex stood up and said he had to get back to the city, that he was going to start over. Before he left, he turned and asked quietly, "Dad, do you ever regret forgiving me?" I looked at him, a tired but warm smile on my face. "No, son. Regret is for people who don't know how to love. I forgave you, not because you deserved it, but because I don't want to spend the rest of my life hating." He nodded, his eyes shining, and he left. I stayed on the porch, watching him walk away until he disappeared behind the trees. I knew he might stumble again, but this time it wouldn't hurt me as much. Everyone has to walk their own path, and I had finally reached the end of mine as a father. As evening fell, I cleared the table, turned off the lights in the house, and left only the yellow bulb on the porch burning. The light flickered in the wind, but it held steady, like my heart, old, covered in scars, but still capable of love. I sat in my rocker, took the last sip of Carol's coffee, and smiled, saying softly, "I didn't beat anyone, honey. I just got my peace back." From the street, the sound of the church bells announced the sunset. The last ray of sun lit up the porch and reflected off the 2 coffee mugs, still warm. And in that light, I saw my reflection. Not the betrayed father, but just a man. A man who lived with dignity and love, right to the very end. If this story captivated you, give the video a like, subscribe to the channel, and share your thoughts in the comments. To hear the next story, click the video on the left side of your screen. Thanks for watching.